Welcome back to my channel. The very first experience that I am going to describe happened many, many years ago. In fact, it's one of my earliest memories. Um, so I was born in Brooklyn, New York, in the neighborhood of Bay Ridge. Bay Ridge is a pretty um, residential type of neighborhood. There's not a lot of stores um, in the neighborhood. There's a lot of houses, and it's quite residential considering some of the other neighborhoods. So this is back in the mid 70s, probably this took place, these events that I'm going to describe. Um, Despite being residential in nature, I did live very close to the exit of the Verrazano Bridge. So there was a lot of traffic noise, and Brooklyn itself, even in a quiet neighborhood like Bay Ridge, is a lot of foot traffic. We're very close together. I lived in a row house, um, meaning that we had shared walls. There was no separation of houses. That's what a row house is. So there's a lot of, you can hear, neighboring families. You didn't have much privacy or much yard space, so family gatherings and, families just talking to each other and coming and going. There was just a lot of general neighborhood type sounds. And particularly from the traffic of the Verrazano Bridge. Um, it's the only way to get from Staten Island to the other boroughs other than ferry into Manhattan. So there was a steady stream of cars, starting early in the morning, like 6 a.m., and traffic didn't really begin to die down until like 10 or 11 o'clock. And it wasn't until, you know, really the dead of night that the neighborhood got really quiet, which is when these incidents occurred. It also helped me get kind of a good frame of reference in terms of time when things happened. So again, this is back in the so this has got to be 73, 74, something like that. I was very young, 3 to 4 years old, probably. We were living in my grandmother's house. My parents and my older brother and I shared a room, a bedroom. The house we lived in, it was a three-bedroom house. They were all located on the second floor of the house. Had a single window, so the only light, and we didn't have a night light, so the only light that would come in would be from neighboring, um, you know, uh, lights on the street, and then any, like moonlight or anything like that. So it was a fairly small window. We didn't get a whole lot of light in the room. Um, and the incidents occurred, there was a handful of times that this happened that I can remember. I don't know the exact number because it's been so many years ago. I do remember some variation, though, between incidents, but they were very, very similar in nature. So essentially, what would happen is I would wake up in the dead of night to a very, very still house. No sounds within the neighborhood, no traffic noises from the bridge, no sounds of, people walking or neighborhood chatter, those kind of general noises that made up the sounds of this section of Bay Ridge where I lived. So it was a very still and quiet um, house and neighborhood. I obviously had a bedtime, so right there was no indication of my parents being up as well. So I'm again being very young and not having a very good gauge of time. I'm estimating that the time frame that these incidents happened was anywhere from like 12 midnight to around 3 o'clock. And again, that's just a best guess based on my hunch and some of the indicators that I've provided. Um, but essentially, what would happen is I would wake up kind of randomly. nothing in particular causing me to wake up, but initially with just a terrible feeling of dread that something terrible was about to happen, something to be really, really frightened of. And having the feeling that something was approaching, something was moving toward me, something very dark, very menacing, something evil. I would get so frightened during this time, this build-up, this anticipation of like this impending doom, that I was more scared than I can ever remember being. So frightened that I would be completely frozen. My limbs would be so tight that they would actually cause me some pain. My muscles were just so constricted. I was just literally scared to the point of paralysis only. And then there were some very odd sounds that grew closer as this feeling of this presence was approaching. And I don't know how to describe the sound. It was almost like sound effects. It's a mechanical type of sound. And the sound would start kind of low, and as this presence approached, it would grow louder. If that makes any sense. It's just a very weird part of the memory, but I'm describing what happened per, what I remember. And so as the sound built up, a presence would become visible in my room. It was always two. And I could see them moving across my room at a pace of kind of a slow walk. It would, and they were two-dimensional. They were only shadow figures. I saw them as shadow images, like against the opposite wall of where my bed was. So my brother and I, as I mentioned, we shared a room. I had my bed against one wall of the bedroom, and he had his bed directly across from mine on the opposite end of the bedroom, also against the wall. Between us was a small night table, I believe. At the foot of our bed on my brother's side was the bedroom door, and on my side was a small closet. We slept with the door closed. And so these shadow figures would appear on my brother's side of the bedroom, like starting on the closed doorway. Now the remarkable thing and the really strange thing about these figures was that they looked like old 1920s, 1930s, I don't know, investigators, or just, I guess this is how men dressed, with a fedora hat and what looked like a trench coat. There was no, I said they presented themselves in two dimensions. So just like someone was casting a shadow against the wall. I didn't see them like actually in the room. They were shadows on the wall and looking at like a side view, a peripheral view of a man in a fedora hat and a trench coat. And I can see a slight outline of the shape of their face, like a nose, but it was all black. Everything was black and kind of, indistinguishable from everything else. There were no features. I couldn't see eyes, couldn't give a description of faces or anything like that. It was, fedora that was kind of tight, low on their head, and then a trench coat which went up, to their neck. So there was only, like from the middle of the forehead down to their chin was the only profile view I can see of their face. And again, it was a shadow view, and it was one of these shadows in front of the other, and they would just go from, emerge at the um, at the doorway and then just move across the wall, as I said, in kind of a pace that I would describe as like a slow walk. With this sound effect, this mechanical sound that accompanied it, and would reach kind of a peak volume when they appeared. And then as they moved further and further away, and eventually out the bedroom, just disappearing or moving through the other wall, the sound effect would eventually just die out, and then I couldn't hear it anymore. And it was at that point that I realized like the danger had passed. So I was in complete paralysis with absolute fear. Even my breathing was extremely shallow. I was afraid to even breathe out at all. My feeling at the time, I had a very, very strong sense that if they realized I was there, if I was alert, awake, moving in some way, that would attract them, that would initiate some kind of contact. And what would happen, what they would do, I don't know. I could only speculate, but the feelings that I had, the emotions that this presence created was only left with me with the impression that something absolutely horrible would happen, that they would take me, they would possess me, kill me, I don't know, steal my soul, something along those lines. And so my brother, I could sometimes hear him just, breathing lightly, obviously asleep, not stirring at all. Obviously way too afraid to move and just waiting. I could slit my eyes slightly, and sometimes I would just slit, just one eye open, and I can see the shadows passing, and just waiting for the danger to pass. I do have a memory of one time being almost completely under the covers, like just the top of my head sticking out of the covers, but knowing, again, based on the feeling, based on this mechanical sound, that there was a presence in my room. And just, fighting every urge to move in any way, showing any kind of, movement under the covers. So I know this happened several times over that time frame. Again, from the time I was about 3 years old, I'm guessing, till about the time I was maybe 5. So maybe 2 to 3 year period. This happened at least twice, but my memory is that it occurred more than that, like maybe double that, 4 times. I'm not really sure. I never told anyone about this. I'm not really sure why. I'm very sure that this wasn't some kind of a nightmare or a recurring dream that I had. I remember being completely awake, sleepy, and a bit disoriented, but being awake. I've had, of course, over the course of my life, and including when I was very, very young, having very, very realistic dreams, and waking up thinking, did that really happen? But then, over time, realizing sometimes it took, 30 seconds, a minute to realize, okay, no, that was just a bad dream. This was an event that I never had that, right? I guess that feeling that, okay, this is, it was a terrible nightmare, but it wasn't real. I just remember being awake, as young as I was, being awake and this actually happening is weird and as extraordinary as that sounds. Now, is it possible that it was some kind of sleep paralysis, which I think is a phenomenon that occurs right on the edge of being asleep and awake, that you can pretty much hallucinate? It's possible. Is it possible that I was so young, my brain wasn't even fully formed, that I misinterpreted something that was kind of odd, that I misinterpreted to this horrific, scary event. It's possible that too. But ironically enough, years and years later, I've heard about this phenomenon of shadow people, with people experiencing them in very, very similar ways that I did. And in fact, as you'll see in kind of the screen of this video is a representation of these shadow people, right? Not done by me, done by someone else, and I'll try and research a bit more, but in the same type of shape, right, and depiction as I remember, people in a fedora with trench coats. So that's a pretty extraordinary coincidence, if you ask me. These are not men in black. That's a different phenomenon. And I know men in black have been described as having the same type of attire and looking in similar ways. But it wasn't that. Again, these were two-dimensional shadows that crossed my room as a shadow form on one wall. But I find it extraordinary that all these years later, and obviously I didn't know anything about shadow people back when I was that age. These are not recent memories that I've just started to remember about my past. These are memories I've held on to and had my whole life. If you asked me at 4 years old about these memories, I would be able to tell you basically the same story. So I don't think there's been any influence over time in kind of reshaping or changing my memories of these events. If anything, it's been some evidence to suggest that maybe others have had a similar experience. What they were, what their origins were, what they wanted, who knows? I can only speculate. If this indeed happened, if this isn't just something else. So just a fascinating account, something that's always stayed with me. Again, one of my earliest memories, something that to this day just makes me wonder, what was it? What is this relationship to these other stories of shadow people? I don't know. Maybe I'll never know. Anyway, that's my first story. I hope you found it interesting. I will try to provide a link to some information about shadow people that I was able to find on the internet in the comments below. I haven't really read any books or don't know a whole lot about the subject matter, just a little bit more than what I've described in this video. So, thank you for watching. Again, I'm interested in your comments if you have any. If you know of people that have had similar experiences or if you've had them, again, please feel free to record your own comments and provide a link, or just provide comments in the comments section of this video. Thank you for watching.